So on November 5th of this year, Donald J. Trump was reelected as President of the United States. And if you wanted to describe the response to his election in one word, from governments around the world, businessmen around the world, that word would probably be panic. And that includes in Canada. I remember seeing an interview with Chrystia Freeland, who's our Deputy Prime Minister. And they asked her after Trump was elected, they said, what do you think about this? And the only thing she could say was, everything is absolutely fine. I don't know about you, but usually when someone says to me, everything is absolutely fine, that's because everything is not absolutely fine. I think it'd be fair to say that they're quite worried about what the election of Trump means for the Liberal government and for capitalism here in Canada. Because the fact is, Donald Trump did not create the crisis that we're seeing in the world economy. Trump is not the reason for all the wars we're seeing around the world. That's perfectly true. But Trump will play the role of massively accelerating all the contradictions that we're seeing bubbling up in the world economy and in the world today. Every country in the world will be affected in some way. But that especially goes for Canada. You can use the analogy of an earthquake. With an earthquake, generally speaking, the closer you are to the epicenter of that earthquake, the more you're going to be shaken by that earthquake. And in that respect, Canada, more than most other countries in the world, is far closer to the epicenter of that earthquake. If you look at the history of the United States and Canada, it's hard to find two countries in the world that are as intertwined as the United States and Canada, economically, politically, in terms of their respective militaries, and so on. You take the question of trade. Something like 77% of Canada's exports are destined for the United States. Tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars every year. But Trump, as we know, is an ardent protectionist. And we had this confirmed just a few days ago. Trump made a post on, I think it's called Truth Social, which is Trump's version of Twitter, where he said, listen, if Canada and Mexico don't stop sending fentanyl across their borders, if they don't stop sending illegal immigrants across their borders, I'm prepared to put a 25% tariff on all goods coming from these countries. Now, in actuality, the amount of fentanyl and refugees coming from the northern border is quite minimal. But that's besides the point. The point is, if Trump actually went through with this, a tariff on all goods coming in from Canada, this would have an absolutely devastating impact on the Canadian economy. It would mean the shutting down of factories. It would mean the layoffs of tens of thousands of working people in Canada, maybe hundreds of thousands, which explains the panic that you're seeing in the Liberal Party. Trudeau's tried his best to try and reassure Trump that he was going to shore up the border. He had a very lovely dinner, I heard, at Mar-a-Lago. I think they got steak and mashed potatoes. Anyway, that's besides the point. They had a meeting at Mar-a-Lago, and anyway, they discussed the issues. And Trump made a joke to Trudeau. He said, well, listen, you're very concerned about the economy. But he said, well, listen, if you're so worried, what I can do is, why don't we just make Canada the 51st state of the United States? And to make it even better, we'll make you the governor of that state, Governor Justin Trudeau. Of course, it's not the kind of thing that you'd want to hear if you're the Prime Minister of Canada. So needless to say, they have reason to worry about what Trump can do for the Canadian economy. On other issues, immigration. Trump has talked about deporting, he says it's something like 15 million. Most estimates say it's closer to 11 million undocumented migrants in the United States. And I'll say this, Canada, and especially our beloved liberals in Canada, like to prattle on about how they're different from Americans, they're different from the United States. We're welcome to immigrants, we're welcome to refugees. We don't have the same kind of toxic division that you see in the United States. But it was interesting to see their response to Trump's pledge. Because needless to say, probably a lot of those people will try and flee the United States. Some of them will try to come to Canada, could be a very large number of people, which has again created a panic in Canada. And these, liberals who love to talk about, welcoming in immigrants with open arms. Well, what was their response? They've been falling over each other to try and prove who will be the best border guard for the United States on the northern border. The liberals came out and said, we're going to send helicopters to the border. We're going to send drones to the border. We're going to expand the mandate of CBSA, the border agency. Even the NDP, which is supposed to be a left-wing party, so-called, when it comes down to it, they're indistinguishable from the Liberal Party in most respects. The NDP came out, Jagmeet Singh, and said, we need to send at least 1,000 more Border Patrol officers to the border. That's the NDP saying that. Of course, it poses the question, who's going to pay for all of that? Drones, Border Patrol officers, helicopters cost money. It's going to be the Canadian taxpayer who at the end of the day is going to be paying for all of this. But anyway, all of these principles evaporated almost within a few days. Justin Trudeau, who started his term in power saying, welcome to Canada, to those fleeing persecution. And now he's saying the opposite. He's saying to Trump, I don't care where you send them. It's not our problem. Just don't send them here. So what you see is the exposure of the hypocrisy, if you'd like, of these liberals and these politicians in Canada. They're not so unlike the Republicans when it really comes down to it. One other issue is defense spending. Now, there was a time when many countries in NATO were not spending the required 2% of GDP on their militaries. That time is past. Now, there's only a few countries which aren't meeting the 2% target. Something like 4 or 5 countries, one of which is Canada. And you can guess how Donald Trump feels about that. He's none too happy about it, to say the least. And I think it's fair to say you're going to see an enormous pressure by Trump in the next period to try and force Canada to raise its spending on the military in the next period. In fact, they've already said that they're going to ramp up spending in the wake of Trump's election. But again, think about what's this going to mean? What does this mean? Because it's easy to talk in terms of 2%, 3%. What does that actually mean? Well, if we were to actually raise our defense spending to 2%, right now it's below 2%, what that would mean, I've seen estimates which say we need to spend another $40 billion a year on the military. Actually, you had the Business Council of Canada come out the other day, kind of like the Central Committee of Canadian Capitalism. It's a club of all the big Canadian corporations, who said, actually 2% is a bit too conservative now. We should go for 3%, which should mean, presumably, another $40 billion spent on the military. But look at the situation in Canada. You got hospitals where people are sleeping in the hallways. You've got infrastructure which is bursting at the seams. Look at what happened in Calgary, where the water main broke and people couldn't use water for weeks on end. You have the transit systems falling apart. You've got a drug epidemic in every major city in the country. You see wages falling behind cost of goods, things like groceries. You got a housing crisis throughout the country. That money could be spent on addressing those issues. But that money is now going to be spent on the military. And not only will it not be spent, it will mean cuts to these things. Cuts to social programs, cuts to wages, and attacks on ordinary Canadians. That's what it's going to mean. It's interesting. Even Pierre Poilievre, the conservative leader, has been reluctant to commit to the NATO target. He's been very vague about this because even he knows that doing that would mean a vicious attack on social programs. So even Pierre Poilievre is being careful. This is what it means. These are the kind of things that the Trump presidency will entail, will mean for Canada. So what's the way out? On the basis of capitalism, there is no way out. That, the Canadian liberals and politicians like to talk about the special relationship between the United States and Canada. They kind of make it seem like it's kind of an equal partnership between two equal countries. What's the fact of the matter? The truth is, you have the largest and most powerful economy and military in the world on the one hand, and on the other hand, you have, its little junior partner, Canada, a puny economy, which is in decline, very little influence, a very small military compared to the United States. It's not a case of two equal partners. I think a better comparison would be the relationship between a master and his butler. That's probably a closer comparison to the relationship between the two. The fact is, the United States has the power, if it wanted to destroy the Canadian economy. The United States is in a position where it says jump, and the Canadian politicians have to say how high. That's the real situation between these two countries. So what option do they have? They can fight Trump, and some of these politicians are talking a good game now that they're going to fight Trump. But fighting Trump would mean punishing tariffs, which would devastate the Canadian economy. It would mean factory closures. It would mean layoffs. It would mean probably sending the Canadian economy into a very deep recession or worse. That's what fighting Trump would mean. They don't have the economic muscle. You can talk a big game, but if you don't have the muscles to back it up, you're going to end up black and blue by the end of that. Or what's more likely, and what they seem to be doing, is to try and get inside the tariff wall. Try and essentially grovel before Trump. Don't put tariffs on the economy. Don't send the immigrants to Canada. Please, we'll do whatever you say. Just don't destroy us. Please, please let us live. And that's what you see with Trudeau rushing over to Mar-a-Lago. Almost, you can imagine him on his hands and knees. Please, Donald, please save us. But that's not going to help either. Because what's Trump going to request? He's going to request more and more spending on the military, which means cuts to our programs. He's going to ask for more and more money being sent to the border, which will have the same effect. He's going to want Canada to play the role of a resource state. He doesn't want us building factories with high-paying union jobs. He wants us digging up resources so that it can fuel American industry, critical minerals, oil, gas, all these kinds of things. That's what it's going to mean. It's going to send Canada even further down the tubes. So either way they go, they're screwed. They're caught between a rock and a hard place. That's the situation. Canada has a reputation for being a very slow-moving country. Things move a lot slower here. So some almost see it like a virtue. We're not like the United States. They had a revolution, they had a civil war. No, not us. We're more reasonable. But the fact is, now, things are going to start moving a lot faster in Canada. And the kind of explosions that we saw in other places, those explosions are going to come to Canada in the next period. And I want to reiterate, it wasn't Trump that created this situation. They're going to try and blame Trump for it. Now, of course, he's going to play a role. But the fact is, you can use the story of the three little pigs. A wolf comes along to blow down your house. But if you built a house made out of solid brick, the wolf's not going to blow it down. But on the other hand, if you build a house of sticks or hay or whatever, I can't remember what they build it out of, but poor material, shoddy material, then the wolf's going to blow it to smithereens. And you can't blame the wolf because it's in the nature of the wolf to do that. Of course, not in real life, but in the story. The wolf comes and blows it down. But who do you blame? If you didn't want it blown down, you shouldn't have built a house made of straw. You shouldn't have built a house made of sticks. And that's exactly what Canadian capitalists have done. They've destroyed the country. They've underinvested in infrastructure. Our hospitals are in the pits. Our cities are in the pits. Wages are in the pits. They're the ones who created this situation to begin with. And now they're going to cry a tear because Trump's going to blow it all down. But they built it on shoddy foundations to begin with. Trump is now going to accelerate that process. But it's not all doom and gloom, because even, some of our friends on the left, it's really doom and gloom. Everything is doom and gloom and pessimism. But there's a silver lining to all of this. And the silver lining is this, that these explosions in the next period is going to have a profound impact on consciousness, on the consciousness of ordinary working people. Because like I said, history's been moving slow for a very, very long time. But it's about to get a lot faster in the next period. And Leon Trotsky, the great Russian revolutionary, he once made a good point. He said it's not changes up and down through history that provoke social change. He said it's rapid shifts in the situation more often, which lead to things like revolutions and general strikes and things like that. And what we're about to see in Canada is going to be just one of those rapid changes in the situation. And people who for decades ignored radical ideas on the left, kind of looked at it as, this is something, sounds good on paper, but it's not serious. It's not practical. Canadians are very practical people, just like Americans. Those people, many of them, are going to look at those ideas on the left and ideas like we have a lot more seriously and start to examine these ideas. What do they have to say? Do they have a solution? And as communists, we need to be there to give people those answers. That's our role. As communists, we're not pessimistic about the next period. We're incredibly optimistic about the next period because people are going to be churning to the right, yes, but also to the left in a massive way like we've never seen. And we need to be there organized with ideas to give them a program, give them the ideas they need to actually bring the system to an end once and for all. That's the task ahead of us. It's an exciting period and it's going to be a revolutionary period. So that's what we can expect.